Joining us now to discuss this further is tonight's opening panel. E.J. Kimball is a security analyst at the Middle East Forum, and Kenneth Timmerman is president and CEO of the Foundation for Democracy in Iran. All right, E.J., let's start with you. How significant is Greenblatt's departure in terms of a setback to the administration's peace efforts, in your opinion?
Well, it could have a potential very big potential ramifications if the plan actually gets to a point of negotiation. I'm skeptical that it will get to that point, but if the Palestinian Authority or some alternative leadership within Palestinian society were willing to actually engage with the Trump administration's plan or their vision, as Jared Kushner calls it, then the loss of Jason Greenblatt would have very big ramifications given his experience as a seasoned negotiator. However, as I mentioned, I'm not convinced that this is where it's going. I think this plan, as I've mentioned on the show before, this is meant to help build a coalition between Israel and its Arab neighbors to deal with the Iranian threat to the region.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And Ken, I want you to pick up on that because Greenblatt clearly played a big role in the Trump administration's efforts to hold Iran in check. And as we just heard from EJ, the idea seemed to have been part of a larger philosophy that peace between Israel and the Palestinians can't be achieved unless Iran's influence in Gaza and the region is greatly reduced. And part of the reason that we were getting traction from Israel's neighbors was under the premise of fighting against Iran. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Iran is like a giant sword planted into the body politic of the Middle East. That sword is touching everyone. It's affecting everybody. If you pull it out, you would have a dramatically different region and dramatically different circumstances. I think it's rather salutary to have a U.S. envoy who says, I will serve for 2 years. If there are parties in the region who are willing to make a deal during that 2-year period, we'll make a deal. If they're not, goodbye. I think that's what Jason Greenblatt has said. This is a Trump negotiating style, and I think the Palestinians are the ones who are going to have to listen to that, and the Iranians know where the U.S. stands when it comes to checking Iranian power.
And EJ, as you said, this is all perhaps irrelevant if the Palestinians aren't willing to come to the table, and they've indicated that they're not. So the peace plan is expected to be released after the Israeli elections. But to what degree, if any, does it matter who's leading Israel when the Palestinians have rejected it sight unseen?
Well, Michelle, that's exactly the point here, which is people are very focused on re-engaging in a peace process. The reality is a peace process is premature at this point because there is still an ongoing war between the Palestinians and their leadership against Israel and the right of the Jewish state to exist. That is still an ongoing war, and until and unless the Palestinian leadership accepts Israel's right to exist, you can't have a peace process because they're unwilling to actually deal with reality. And I think the legacy of Jason Greenblatt's time is the fact that he spoke out and made these points clear, that the Palestinians don't have a right to a capital in East Jerusalem, but it's an aspiration to be negotiated only if they're willing to actually accept Israel.
All right. EJ can stick around. We want to discuss more after the break. Let's rejoin our panel. With us is EJ Kimball and Kenneth Timmerman. All right, EJ, this was a half-hour meeting. As we said, Boris Johnson dealing a lot, has his plate full with all of the Brexit drama. Given where he's at right now, do you really expect some significant foreign policy shift from the UK?
I wouldn't expect a significant foreign policy shift, but I do think it's important to bring Boris Johnson on board with the goals of dealing with the Iranian regime. You know, the French are trying to throw a lifeline to Iran right now with this proposed $15 million line of credit that the United States thankfully has rejected out of hand because it goes exactly against the policy of squeezing the Iranian regime. So any allies that Israel, that the United States can get in pressuring the Iranians, I think is good. And as you know, we know with elections, you never know what the results of them can be.
Right.
And so having the Prime Minister on board, I think, is a very important step. And a 30-minute meeting can accomplish that.
All right, Ken. We know that, to EJ's point, the French offering this $15 billion line of credit is succumbing to Iran's extortion efforts. Iran is upping the ante on those efforts now, saying that it is openly violating the research and development limitations of the deal. We don't know what it has been violating before, but now it's openly saying that it's going to do that. How dangerous is that? If Iran continues on this path, at what point could it have a nuclear weapon?
Well, actually, I think that was probably the main reason that Prime Minister Netanyahu wanted to meet Boris Johnson, was to make sure that he appreciated the dangers of the Iranian nuclear weapons program. And it is a nuclear weapons program. Let's just be very clear about that. Remember Netanyahu just a couple of years ago in the United Nations in New York, where he had the picture of the Iranian bomb, and he said the Iranians are right up here, 90%. You know, that was 7 years ago. Now the Iranians have accomplished so many things since then. They are going to be enriching up to 20% uranium. 20% uranium is essentially weapons-grade material, okay? It is just a couple of more weeks from 20% to get weapons-grade material. The Iranians have essentially shortened the time to nuclear weapons material acquisition to just a couple of weeks. They have fifth-generation centrifuges they're going to be spinning. And I think the Prime Minister wanted to talk to Boris Johnson and make sure that he did not, how should I say, listen to the siren songs from President Macron, who, by the way, I think was really disgraced in Biarritz when he brought the Iranian foreign minister there. President Trump in person rebuked him. You are not going to be serving as my surrogate for negotiations with Iran, Trump said. And by the way, also, so we're clear about this, there's not going to be any U.S.-Iranian talks, not going to happen with this president.
I don't know. They could happen perhaps on the sidelines of the United Nations. But before we debate that, Ken, I want to focus on what you said about Iran being potentially so close to a nuclear weapon. I mean, it kind of speaks volumes about the efficacy of the deal in the first place, that Iran can just get there so quickly. But if Iran continues to violate the deal, enrich uranium, develop weapons program, we know it's working on the delivery system with intercontinental ballistic missiles disguised as a space program. At what point, Ken, does Israel, perhaps even the U.S., find it necessary to take some kind of action against those development plans?
Well, there are many ways of taking action, Michelle, and they don't all involve B-2 bombers or missile strikes or things like that. Just a couple of days ago, the Iranians tried to launch one of these space launch vehicles that you mentioned, and it went poof on the launch pad, and the President of the United States tweeted out a very accurate picture of the scene of that explosion and the results of that explosion. Remember what happened with Stuxnet, where the United States, apparently with the help of Israel, implanted malware into the Iranian uranium enrichment program and crashed over 1,000 of their centrifuges. So there are many other ways that the U.S. can intervene. It does not all involve military action.
All right, we'll keep our eye out for these accidents that happen at these space stations. Kenneth, thank you so much. Ken Timmerman, EJ Kimball, appreciate it as always. Thank you.